Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us and reminding that today's session will be recorded for future use and will be available like the two previous ones we did in June. In the coming weeks, you will be notified by email when they are made accessible. So just like heads up, today's session will be dense with a lot of content to cover by inspiring panelists who are generous enough, thank you, to share their stories and experiences. We will take questions at the end of the session if time allows. In order to do so, please use at the end of the discussion the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will make our best to answer everyone's question, but might not be able to do so. So if you have unanswered question at the end, please write us an email at marketing@flow.com. So marketing@flow.com, and we will answer you directly. So let's jump right into it. I'm so excited about that session. I'm so grateful that everyone accepted. Unfortunately, we couldn't have one of the panelists today, but we're covering all the cities, all bases are covered. So what we're gonna address in terms of content today is around cities, municipalities, and public charging. So with many cities and municipalities taking significant steps to meet their own aggressive emission reduction goal, being able to provide accessible and reliable public EV charging infrastructure is one of the many tools decision makers have at hand. So today we have the chance to hear from 5 innovative leaders who push the idea of public charging even further by making it accessible to drivers who are parking on the street by providing curbside charging. They will speak over the next hours about the various methods of deploying curbside charging station and how these stations can be used to accelerate EV adoption and meet emission reduction goals. So before jumping into the session, I will give a brief moment to all of our panelists to introduce themselves and explain a little bit who they are, what are they doing in their capacity? So I'll start with Paul McClatchy from City of Kingston. Paul, I think you're on mute if you're trying to speak.
There we go.
Great.
Thanks very much. Yeah, my name is Paul McClatchy. I am the City of Kingston's Environment Director, and part of my role has been to develop and implement our city's EV strategy. A big part of that strategy was the installation of a public charging network consisting of 42 level 2 chargers and 2 level 3 fast chargers. Our EV strategy is a key component of our city's commitment to GHG reduction, and our public EV charging network was built to provide Kingstonians the confidence to make the switch to EVs and to encourage EV drivers to visit our city.
Great, thank you so much. So, Yannick Roy from City of Montreal. Now it's your turn.
Hi, my name is Yannick Roy, and I'm a planning advisor at the direction of the mobility for the City of Montreal. I work for the City of Montreal since 16 years. I've worked on bicycle lane project, intelligent transportation system projects. I work in support of my director also. I'm responsible for the division's communication project and with communication with partners and elected officials. I represent the division and the direction on some committees. For nearly a year and a half, I've been responsible for planning the charging station in Montreal. I planned the network for charging station in collaboration with the City of Montreal shareholder, like Montreal's borough, making sure to meet their needs and objectives. The City of Montreal owns its fleet of level 2 charging stations. The majority of these stations are installed on sidewalks. Currently, we have 816 charging stations that have been installed, and we are about to begin the installation of the station planned for 2020. I also represent the mobility department on the city's transportation electrification committee. The city of Montreal wants to reduce greenhouse gases by 55% on its territory by 2030. As you know, most of the GHG come from the transportation sector. I'm also the proud father of two beautiful girls, 2 and 4 years old. I want to preserve and improve the future for them by carrying out initiatives that will have a direct impact on improving the environment by reducing GHG and the adoption of sustainable travel measures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yannick. Great intro. So I'll give the mic to Norma from City of Los Angeles.
Hi, good morning. My name is Norma Sahakian, and I am the Executive Director for the Bureau of Street Lighting in the City of LA. I oversee all the maintenance and operation of over 220,000 street lights in the City of Los Angeles. So we have gotten into the business of EV charging stations, which is interesting. We have over 432 charging stations installed in the city that are attached to streetlights. One of the reasons that we decided to do this was because the City of LA's had a large LED conversion program starting in 2008, which really reduced the electricity being used on the system. So there was an ability and opportunity to attach additional infrastructure to the streetlights. So that basically gave us a faster way of attaching EV charging stations. And so we're very excited about the program. The main reason the city is doing this is to try to reduce range anxiety for our EV drivers and incentivize EV drivers to basically have the confidence to go and purchase EV vehicles to reduce emissions in the City of LA. Thank you.
Thanks, Norma. Unfortunately, Brian may join, but we, fortunately enough, we have from City of New York, but fortunately enough, we have Susan McSherry from City of New York with us today. So please, take a minute to introduce yourself, Susan. And I'm noticing you're on mute. So yeah, great, super, thank you.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Susan McSherry. I work for New York City DOT's Office of Alternative Fuel Programs and work with a great team that includes that office and the DOT Policy Office, as well as partners at the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Department of Citywide Administrative Services, that is the purchasing arm for the City of New York. And my task here is to project manage and get on the street approximately 120, not approximately, exactly, 60 flow chargers, 120 parking spaces, 100 of which will be publicly accessible, and then 20 as a set aside, 20 parking spaces or 10 chargers set aside for the New York City fleet. So that is sort of the primary reason I'm on the call today. I also manage the New York City Clean Trucks program, which is a truck voucher incentive program for businesses that are located in or operate within drive to and from New York City industrial business zones throughout the 5 boroughs. And what's key about that is that this program has an emphasis on market transformation and bringing medium and heavy duty electric trucks to the city. And so we're trying to kind of fire on all cylinders with both the light duty and the heavy duty adoption scheme for New York City.
Thank you so much, Susan. So thanks all. And today's session is structured around 5 main key questions. How it's going to work is I'm going to ask the question to all of you, and we'll start with City of Kingston, then Montreal, Los Angeles, and then New York. So the first question is, you've all installed charging infrastructure in your cities, and we know how complex it can be. So, you need to be a big believer that it will have an impact on, the project has an impact of EV adoption. So one of the things that I wanted to talk with you today is what were the main or key primary goals that you were hoping to achieve by deploying curbside charging infrastructure? So I know that, you know, it's about EV adoption, but sometimes it's also we're talking about equity too, to make sure that all the boroughs have the same type of infrastructure. And the other thing is, what were your intention with deploying it, and perhaps more importantly, like, did you achieve them? So every time a city or a leader takes that action to unroll that type of project, we know that it's very it's not the first time you're doing it is kind of a little bit difficult. So you want to make sure that you're also reaching your goals. So what were your primary goals? Like, what have you done? And did you feel that after, well, for Susan it's going to be less relevant because you're in the midst of doing that, but maybe you can talk a little bit about like the different steps and what kind of objective that you were foreseeing, and did you achieve those objectives? So I'll start with Paul from City of Kingston.
Yeah, thanks very much. And yeah, totally agree that our key goal was to drive EV adoption and use, but that's derived from higher strategic imperatives, and those, as we've already mentioned, are reducing those GHG emissions in our community. We know that 40% of our community's GHG emissions come from diesel and gasoline transportation, and getting the electrification of vehicles going is probably the easiest and most direct way to put a dent in that carbon footprint for our city. So that was certainly a major strategic driver for us. The other big strategic driver is we brand ourselves literally as Kingston, a place where history and innovation thrive. I think we've got the history part down pat, but the innovation piece can be a little more difficult. And electrifying transportation and being an early adopter with an aggressive public EV charging system that's on the street, it's visible, that really meshes very well with our strategic goal to be an innovative city and a place where innovation is welcomed. And we've gotten that kind of feedback from many people. Our partners at Queen's University and St. Lawrence College both are quite keen on EV charging as well, and they've both put in a lot of EV charging infrastructure, and we share our learnings quite a lot. So that's really working out quite well. And one of the things with the curbside chargers, especially with the nice big smart twos from Flow, is they're very visible, and it really provides that everyday signpost of EVs are here. It's a regular thing. It's not science fiction anymore, and this city is embracing it. And that's as I said, it's really supporting our goals, not just from the greenhouse gas emissions perspective, but our goal to make the brand of the city of Kingston one surrounded by innovation.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, Nick from City of Montreal, what were your goals and dreams, and did you find, because you've been through several deployments, so after all these years, did you you're pushing the program further, so I believe you're achieving what you were looking at the beginning, but what were they, and do you feel that you overcame them, or like it just went like under your goals? Like, how can you describe it?
In fact, the primary goals for the city of Montreal was the same thing as Paul just said before, to reduce GHG emission on the territory of the city of Montreal. In 2016, the city of Montreal revealed its transportation electrification strategy, which details several objectives related to the electrification of transportation. One of these objectives was to install a public network of 1,000 charging stations by 2020. we are at the end of this schedule right now, and I'm proud to say that we will have reached this goal by the end of the year. Through this deployment, the city wished to promote and facilitate the adoption of electric vehicle by citizens. At the beginning, when we put a lot of charging station, people say it's too much charging station for the number of electric cars on Montreal. But right now, we see an evolution in the number of electric car EVs.
So you're saying that at the beginning you felt like there was kind of a pushback saying like this is too much, there's not enough like electric vehicle to support it, and right now it's kind of reverse where you feel that it's pushing adoption in probably boroughs or part of the city where people didn't have like private residential parking, and you know there was no way they could buy an electric car if they didn't have like charging on the curbside, right?
Yeah, in fact, most of Montreal's population live in the medium and high density sector where it's not possible to have a private parking lot or to install a charger for an EV car at home. Knowing that the majority of electric vehicle drivers charge their vehicle at home, it seems even more important to install this charging station in this sector, or as well in the majority of travel generators. Since the beginning of this great adventure with the planning, with the charging stations, we have seen the usage statistic grow steadily, reaching more than 25,000 charge a month.
Charge event a month. Wow, that's impressive, right?
Yeah. The implementation of this charging station has a positive effect on the adoption of electric vehicles by the population. The number of, as I said, the number of new EV on the territory constantly increased. In 2019, the number of EVs in Montreal was about 6,000 cars, EVs, and it should approach to 30,000 in 2025. This is very positive.
Right. Oh, thank you so much. Norma, what about the Surya Valley?
Okay, so basically in LA, you know, we're quite diverse. We are a city of driving culture. You know, as a lot of the other cities have expressed, you know, the state had its goals to bring down emissions, as well as the city has adopted its own goals. You know, we have taken it upon ourselves, and because of the fact that I mentioned earlier that we had an LED program that basically reduced our energy usage, we were able to attach these EV chargers to our streetlights. And one of the things that allowed us to do was to get them out quickly. We didn't have to put in a lot of underground infrastructure. Everything was already in place. We didn't use meters. We worked it out with the utility to utilize the meter that's within the EV charging unit. And you know, we tried our best to make sure that the units were distributed equally. We have not boroughs, but we have council districts, and they were distributed. We tried to make sure they were as equal as possible throughout the city. Also in the city, we have a lot of cluttered sidewalks, so there's a lot of stuff on our sidewalks. So one of the goals was to really keep I think was to not add another piece of furniture into the sidewalk area. So the streetlights were really a good solution for this. You know, the main goal is to incentivize the EV purchases in the city of LA. And I think we've done that. We've done that quickly with our fast deployment. And we're continuing to do that with about 150 EV chargers every year.
Great, super. So Susan, like I know, you know, you're in the midst of deploying, and it's always a bit difficult to do that within a city like New York, like we experience also in Montreal. So, but what are your goals, and how would you say like, oh, we achieved success with this project in a couple of years?
Sure. Well, we have a really good kind of, you know, structure and bones to this as a long-term plan with various executive orders, local laws, policy initiatives such as One NYC. And so as part of that, transportation is kind of a small fraction of that. Our greenhouse gas emission issues really are from the built environment, not so much from transportation, but it's still a key component. It really does need to be addressed. So with all of those, sort of documents and policy initiatives, what we're faced with is trying to increase electric vehicle registrations for privately owned vehicles 25% by 2025. And in terms of the city's own fleet, the mayor just signed recently Executive Order 53 in February of 2020 that kind of calls for all of the city's fleet assets to be electrified by 2040. So time goes by fast, and those kind of dates will kind of be here before you know it, especially the 25% uptick in privately owned vehicles. So what we really want to do as a result of this pilot program is to just prove the case. We have now 11,000 vehicles registered in New York City that are EVs, but we need to get to, when you do all of the evaluations, we need to get to 386,000. And that is a hockey stick, right there. It's really got to go up, and it's got to go up fast. And we only have 107 publicly accessible DC fast chargers at the moment, about 1,450 level 2s that are publicly accessible, and that includes 38 of which are city fleet chargers. And we need to get to 69,000 level 2 and 2,600 DC fast. So wow. It's really going to be, a heavy lift to do the planning, to do the utility mapping, to figure out where these are going to go in such a dense environment, as many on the panel have just alluded to. We also, 50% of our drivers live in multifamily housing. So they park on the street, and it's just not, the numbers just don't pencil out unless you have accessibility at the curb. So, but, I wouldn't call it, well, I guess I might call it baby steps, but, it's one thing, one foot in front of the other. We're trying to we're investing $10 million of capital funding to upfit some DC fast chargers into our municipal owned parking lots, and get these flow chargers up and at the curbs throughout the city.
Great, thank you, Susan. So one of the things that we all work with each and every one of you, full disclosure, but one of the things that I find very interesting when we're looking at the model of ownership / operating for the different stakeholders we work with, especially with cities and municipalities, is there seems to be many models emerging. So what I would like to ask you is, what is your model that you took as first deployment and then the other phase? So in other words, do you own and operate your own station, or do you work with a network operator who owns the station and you only rent the charging service? In some, what is your operating model and what are the benefits associated with your specific models? And I would start with Paul on this one.
Yeah, thanks. So in Kingston, we've chosen, we own our charging stations and we operate them, but we operate them through the Flow charging network. And when we were procuring our charging systems and looking at the various options, there was different options, like you said, like renting and having other people operate them for us and so forth, and perhaps even contracting with a third party to run the charging network. But one of the things we were really cognizant of was what we were trying to do was introduce something brand new to the city of Kingston and to drive change through placing this kind of technology on the street. And so one of the barriers we thought would be in front of us is going to be trust. Would people trust these, this charging system to work properly and to be fair and not to be overpriced and so forth. And so I think with the city ownership model, we feel that people's trust in the new infrastructure is going to be maximized. We're not in this for profit. We're in this for public good. And I think people understand that. So, that's why we selected that ownership model. But also, I think, in hindsight now that we've been running this for about 2 years, we understand that the cost and the effort required to run the public EV charging network is not that large. And I think that if we had made the decision to outsource the ownership of this, then we would have missed an opportunity to provide a more affordable service.
Interesting. So affordability was key in how you decided to go, also making sure it's accessible for everyone.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, Nick, on your side for City of Montreal, like what is the operating model? And did you change your mind midway, or would you be open to new ways of looking at how to provide charging services to your citizen? Oh, you're on mute, Yannick.
Sorry.
Start again.
Yeah. Okay. So the City of Montreal own also the network of charging station of level 2. We have 816 charging station installed mostly on curbs. And we are about to begin the implementation of a new station in 2020. For the City of Montreal, being owner of his own charging station, give its latitude in the location where to place a charging station. We own the entire public domain, so it's almost possible everywhere, in fact, almost. The fact that we monitor almost all the charging stations allow us to be familiar with the equipment from their installation to their eventual replacement. As part of preventive maintenance once the service life has been reached, depending of the general condition of the charging station at the time. We are planning to start some maintenance activities by city employees during the next year. This will allow us to create an in-house expertise and possibly reducing the cost of one-time repairs to store parts and taken from a damaged station that has been replaced, and finally to intervene very quickly when repairs are required. Currently, we have an efficient and fast maintenance contract with Ad Energy Flow, but we, like other cities, we want to reduce our dependence on external resource by developing in-house expertise.
So for you, like the owning your station was also a way of saying, okay, we want to put some here. Maybe there's going to be less usage for the next year or so, but then we know that probably, people will buy a car and then it will probably boost usage. So it was a way for you of, kind of controlling how it's being deployed. Plus you want to feel like you're master of your own domain and being able to maintain it. Then, okay, I get it.
Great. Yeah, we control all the chain of installation, maintenance, replacement. We are all for the services for the operation. We are linked to a subsidiary of Hydro-Québec, the state corporation responsible for electricity in the province. It's the Circuit Electric, the electric network that handles all the customer services and system monitoring. So it's the provincial network of a public charging station. So people coming from Quebec City, Rimouski City can come in Montreal, they are all on the same network. So it's easy for all the EVs or owner to travel in the province.
Great, thank you. What about you, Norma? Like, what was your favorite kind of model? And I understand in your case, it's a bit different because you have to work directly with the utility and you don't have like some metering. So there's like some, it's a bit special in your case. But like, what kind of pushed the idea of oh, we should own that whole infrastructure?
Right. So yes, we basically purchase and own the EV charging stations. And my portion is the 430 chargers on streetlights. The city has more in parking lots and such, but for the ones on the streetlights, we own them. And there were a couple of reasons that we decided to do it that way. Some of them were some of the reasons that that have already been discussed. But one was, like Paul was saying, to make sure that the residents had trust in having someone manage, and it wasn't just there to make money. And the main reason that we actually started it was because since it was going to be put on our streetlights, we have our own electricians that actually work on the streetlights. So we didn't want two entities kind of maintaining the same structure. Mm-hmm. So in order to have that sense of safety, we decided to own them. But there were several benefits that came out of it. As discussed, we were able to control the price and make it affordable for everyone. During COVID, once COVID started, we actually talked to the utility and we made it free at this point, and it's going to be that way for a while until probably COVID will stop. So, and that was the flexibility that we enjoy having as we own the model, and we can go ahead and maintain it. So there's a lot of advantages to owning the model, and that's kind of the way the city has been going. Not just with the ones on streetlights, but some of the other ones as well, from what I understand, that they own their EV charging stations as well.
Do you foresee it like changing over time as the market mature, or you're always into let's own the infrastructure, it's a public service and we should be the one owning that?
I think for the ones on the streetlights, they may stay the same just because of the safety issue. The other ones that are not on the streetlights in the city, it's a little bit unclear what's going to happen. I think there may be an opportunity to make a change later if there's something that would make it more efficient, maybe maintenance wise. But at this point, I don't think that's really kind of in the realm of what we're doing. There's, a lot of different models that we're using as well. So I think the city and I think a lot of cities are doing this, just kind of like feeling their way through. But maybe when things become more out there, then maybe there will be more opportunities to kind of do a different model. But at this point, this is the model that works for us.
Great, thank you. Susan, your case is a bit different in New York City. Can you just talk about it?
Sure, completely. So we don't have a municipally owned utility, so we don't have the option. And so working with Con Edison, we have a special relationship, right? Because all of the assets are in the roadbed and in the streets, curbside. So our model going forward, so assuming that this all goes very well and it proves, there is demand, and it looks like it would be a really good idea to expand it. Of course, given all the numbers I, just parroted off earlier, it would have to be, right? So our model would be a franchise or consent model, and DOT, that's how we operate by charter, and we would go for a bid, and that bid would have to, we would have to, third party it to another entity.
Okay, so this is how you're running these type of infrastructure anyway,
well,
right?
I'm just saying, yeah. So, but it's, it's not, there's not a lot of examples of it. The closest one is the company, I think it's still City Bridge, but we had the public telephone stations all throughout the city, that those were converted. Some of those locations, many of them were converted to Link NYC, which is sort of an informational kiosk. It's about the same height, you know, has the same sort of side footprint, you know, in the public space there. And they went in at locations where there were formerly phone booths. So you already had wiring, you already had, you know, conduit, you had a lot of it was, you know, just a good place to do, you know, location wise. But for us, you know, we have to, well, we just, I mean, in terms of, you know, the ownership model, the only option we have is to do a franchise or a consent. That's just, you know, how the rules are written right now.
Great. Okay. So it's interesting to see how the different cities are operating, and it's probably also linked to how other projects are being managed in all of these cities for certain types of infrastructure. One of the things I wanted to talk was, you know, you guys have all different urbanism bylaws or urban development roadmap and priorities, and all topped by, and you've talked about it, by multiple site constraints. So how did you go about site selection in your territory? Like, what kind of criterions came into play, and what were the most important factor when it came to deploying infrastructure on the curbside? So I'll start with Paul. Like, how did you choose your sites?
Yeah, that was a really important decision for us early on, and to be honest, our site selection process was fairly ad hoc, or at least it ended up being fairly ad hoc. We assumed that EV drivers would be pretty good at finding chargers, and of course they are, because that's the life of an EV driver, right? So placing them at the, let's say, the maximum traffic locations or you know, specific intersections wasn't as critical for us. What was critical was, again, keeping the cost down, and so we wanted to keep our planning and construction process as simple and as rapid as possible. And so what we ended up doing was focusing only on properties that the city owned. And of course, we own the road right of way, we own parking lots, we own rinks and arenas and so forth. And we selected locations based on a sort of a fair geographic distribution of charging access. So we didn't want it all in the downtown. We didn't want it all up by the major highway, Highway 401. And the beauty of the municipality is, of course, we own property right across the city, and we were able to do that. So it's quite a balanced distribution of charging access. One of the interesting things was that with our level 3 fast charging stations, originally we were going to place them up in the north part of the city where the big highway goes through, Highway 401, thinking that it would be city to city travelers that would be using those the most, and that's normally the case. But we actually saw quite a bit of interest from private sector commercial operators who were ready to put level 3 fast charging up by that highway. So we thought it would be better to put it right in our downtown, so that if people were doing that city to city traveling and they wanted that half-hour quick charge, we could bring them into our downtown and support our downtown business improvement area. And of course, we got a lot of support from our BIA on that, and it's turned out to be really successful. We do see those chargers being used quite a lot, especially you know, our partners at Flow tell us that the majority of people that are using those fast chargers are actually from out of Kingston. So they're doing exactly what we had hoped they would do by bringing people into the commercial district of our town. I'd say also, interestingly as well, the place where we see the most conflict between EV drivers and non-EV drivers for competition of these spots is of course in the places of highest parking demand. So we've got a couple of streets in the downtown where the parking demand is super high, and we do have a charger in that location, and that's where we get the most conflict. So I think if we were going to redo this process again, we'd probably actually try to move some of our EV chargers away from those high demand areas to reduce that kind of conflict. Because as I said, the EV drivers themselves are really resourceful. They can find these things. You could put them behind a dumpster and they'd find them. and I don't think they're generally fussy about whether they have to park on this street or one block over.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. But probably as it gets like more mass, you know, people want to have like convenient spot too. So it's there's always going to be
I think you're right. I think you're right. And you know, it's when we went into this, we went into this venture as a catalyst. We wanted to be a catalyst to drive EV adoption, but we don't believe the city's going to be in the business of providing EV charging, you know, exclusively or forever. So really, we want the movement to start, and once it starts, we're happy to sort of get out of the way a little bit and let others take on the EV charging apparatus, because it's a business support, right? If everybody's driving EVs, you want to be able to provide that service to get people to come to your business.
Thank you. So yeah, Nick, did you feel that kind of tension in between EV drivers and non-EV drivers, especially downtown Montreal? And how did you go about site location? I know we've talked a little bit, you know, about areas like Plateau where people don't have access to private parking, but how did you choose all the sites in the city?
Yeah, we have the same concerns about the location, about the conflict between the EV's driver and the other driver. We see every day regular car parked in front of charging station, and police have to give ticket, but the respect is not always there. At the beginning, for the distribution, at the beginning for our charging station deployment adventure, the city set charging station to cover as much as territory as possible, a fair distribution, like Paul said. Unfortunately, some stations were installed in areas like single-family homes where people have the possibility of installing a charging station at home. So it was not that makes not sense. Now,
but at the beginning, you don't know, right? So you test, and then you see usage, and then you say, okay, you know, I think there is probably more need over there.
Yeah, but the distribution was to be fair and to put the charging station everywhere. Now the potential for charging is evaluated based on population density, worker density, major travel generators, commercial areas, and also we are looking for future major urban projects where the charging station can be integrated into the work. We are also looking at if the potential is high enough to install dual station at the beginning to reduce the cost of doubling the terminal in a few years.
So did you come up with like a kind of scorecard? Like you're looking at a certain like district and you're saying, okay, you know, I have these criteria, I have like density, I have commercial activities, I have like workplace, I have like multi-residential units also. So I know it's going to be mixed use, and based on past usage, I can predict that usage is going to be high. Like,
yeah,
did you develop these kind of tools internally?
Yeah, but that part it's easy, kindly easy. But our main challenge remains in the physical criteria for installation. We can install this charging station on curbside that will have a minimum width of 2.8 meters minimum. Let me tell you that it's not common in Montreal. This width make it possible to install charging station without block the sidewalk for people with reduced mobility or snow removal operation.
Or sweeping the sidewalks too, yeah.
Yeah, so the machinery has to pass on the sidewalk to remove the snow. Our second important criteria is the distance from the electrical connection points. The greater the distance, the greater the bill. So we have to juggle in order to respect the annual budget that we have and the number of charging stations that we have to install in the objective. Sometimes we have to make a tough choice. Many people suggest that we install charging station on the street light pole like Norma do. But unfortunately, it's not possible in Montreal for various reasons of electrical standards and electrical power of our lighting network.
Great. So Norma, like, you know, and this subject is so passionate, and we have, you know, I'm so passionate about it. Like, we have another 13 minutes, so I'll probably like crunch some of the last questions together. But Norma, like, how did you decide on site?
So yeah, like a lot of the speakers are discussing, the site has so many different variations. Everybody thinks, well, we'll just go put it with this criteria or this criteria, but there's a lot that come into factor. So when we started, we looked basically like the other ones for the high commercial areas where there was a lot of traffic, but then you are competing with the parking situation because, as I said, LA is a culture of drivers. So we tried that in the beginning, and then we also had to make sure we were very diverse. And as Yannick was saying, we had to make sure that the street lighting system was able to carry the load. So those were different criteria we started in the beginning. And of course, we had such a big city that we didn't have to worry too much about other criteria. But now, as we're coming to it and we're getting more than 430 on streetlights, we're now starting to look at usage maps where we take a look at the usage of the different locations. You know, we do want to drive the EV purchases, so you want to put them there even before they're being used. But now I think as more drivers are purchasing EVs, now we're starting to look at the usage to see where the high usages are, and we want to add more there. And then even where they're as low usage, we still want to include them in the program, but it may not be as much as before. But yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. Like Yannick was saying, also the physical factors on the sidewalk itself. Luckily, we're attaching to the streetlight, so we don't have too much to worry about that. And we're not doing any underground work, so we don't have to worry too much about substructures. So that really helps us out a lot. But those were the criteria that we're looking at. And so as going forward, we might start looking more at usage, and we're going to try to push more into multi-unit dwelling areas, which we really haven't been able to get into yet. So we're going to try in the next year or two to kind of push into those areas.
Thank you. And Susan, like, New York that must have been a challenge.
It's like no other. Yes, definitely. Again, you know, not to repeat what everybody's already said, but it's been challenging. We just to back up, we did a feasibility, sort of a study of what would be the best. The name of it was Curb Enthusiasm, which is a little bit of a play on words from the Larry David show. But what we looked at was where, you know, how could we create a construct for, you know, a game plan for how we would do this. So of course we looked at EV registrations overall, car ownership, census data, journey to work, and then looked at different street typologies, such as like angle parking, under viaducts, you know, parking areas that are underneath our highways in our local, you know, arterials. And then spur streets off of commercial corridors where you're close enough to the restaurants and the stores, but you're not right on the avenue necessarily, to kind of facilitate, you know, the other uses on the sidewalk. I mean, there's a lot going on New York City sidewalk. There's a lot of different street furniture that people need to get around. So putting them kind of just on the spur of that commercial street, we thought was a good idea. And then, you know, the typologies, just residential mid-block. Why not, right? This is a pilot. This is a test. Let's see how that works. And also locating them again near those trip generators, like what we like to call EDs and MEDs. So our schools and our hospitals, where we have a high number of staff that drive to and from. So that's kind of how we set it up. And then in terms of working with Con Edison, we had to then take that sort of construct and look in the different 5 boroughs to see where it made sense. Where could we put it close to Lincoln Center in Manhattan, for instance? Could we site it, in the Bronx near the college? We had an equity lens as well. So we would like to make sure that these don't show up just in Manhattan, which has the highest registration of EVs battery plug-in hybrids, I should say. But also in LMI areas to, again, incentivize people to trust their buying instincts. I really want to do this. I love these cars, but I'm just scared I won't be able to charge anywhere. So by the city stepping up and working with Con Ed to provide that visibility, we're hoping that helps to spur some trust in the system that these are coming. This is like just the beginning, but there'll be support for you. And then so we had the siting design guidelines, minimum distances between the fire hydrant, the link, the doorways of buildings. You couldn't be right smack in front of it. And then
I guess ADA as well, right? You have
all
like
of it, ADA as well, right? And we have pretty narrow sidewalks overall. Where we don't have narrow sidewalks is in the core of Manhattan, but we chose not to go there because most of the level 2 EV charging that is publicly available is located in Manhattan. Unfortunately, you have to pay a wall, you have to go into a parking garage to get it, but it's there. But we were concerned about what's the outer boroughs as well, and trying to build up infrastructure in those outer boroughs where there really isn't a lot of garage parking available. Mostly, is on-street parking. So we looked at all of that. Then we also had to filter internally with our capital plan. What is any street work going on? We had to look at our paving schedule to see if any of those streets were what we call protected streets, where they've done a new paving job. Usually you don't go in and do a street cut on a newly paved street. The DOT rule is at least 18 months before you can even do it. And then as you go in, the older it gets, it's like a 5-year kind of a thing. The older it gets, the less work you have to do to restore it. But if it's on the newer side, it's money to put that street back to good working order. Yeah. So that was an issue that we wanted to avoid as well. And then once we made the decisions of these are locations that we like, we think it makes sense based on the study. We handed those sites off to Con Edison, and Con Edison used their consultant to do a pre-screen just to see if there was any subsurface conditions or any issues going on their end. And if it passed the pre-screen, they went out and they did the survey. So it started to develop the book, the construction book.
So very comprehensive process.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we completely exploded the session. There's only like 6 minutes left, and as a last note, what I would ask you to do quickly, each of you, is, do you have anything you could pass on to cities? You've been through like a lot of that process of putting charging on the curbside and all the hurdles that you went through, and also like the great results you guys got or will get in terms of the city of New York. But could you pass any key learning or best practices to our viewers right now and help them? So whether it's a utility or a city, like, is there any key thing that you're thinking of that you was like, oh my God, if I knew that at the beginning of the project, it would have been so much easier? So I'll start with Paul.
Thanks, Genevieve. Geez, key learning would have been so much easier.
So much easier. Make your life easier. Like so easy.
As I mentioned before, placing some of these chargers in less competitive locations probably would have made my life a little easier, because to be honest, once we had installed them, we got a lot of media attention, a lot of public attention, and the public immediately gravitated towards, there's a gasoline car parked in front of the EV charging station again on Clarence Street, which is our busiest location. If I could have put that curbside location on a side street, like 1 block over, I probably wouldn't have had half of those problems. The other thing I would say is that, I think we really made a good decision when we went with Flow and using the Flow network, because not only is it I guess it's Canada's largest EV charging network, but it immediately got us, everybody that was already a Flow member, Kingston was on their map then, which was good. I would have hated the idea of Kingston developing its own app or its own way to access charging. I think that would have really hampered our ability to get traction, especially from people that aren't from Kingston. So it really surprised me the number of people that were using our chargers that were not from Kingston. So and that wasn't a huge consideration when we started this. And if we had done something that would have hampered people's ability from outside of Kingston to use our chargers, that would have been a big mistake.
Thanks. So Yannick, you have 1 minute. What is for you the key learnings or things say, oh, now I know, but so I can't unsee what I've seen or unlearn what I learned. So what would it be?
Not to put charging station mainly on major road arterials. Since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, there's many temporary development that has been carried out on those streets to improve security of citizens, and these developments have rendered this charging station unusable. They have to be put out of service. And now discussions are underway to make those development permanent. So we will have to change the location of those charging stations. It's very costly. So many cities around the world, are rethinking the allocation on street space and for sustainable modes, pedestrian, cyclists, public transit, and rather than parking. So sidewalk curbs extension are also redesigned, resulting in the relocation of some charging station. So maybe just put the charging station on the secondary street near the main, the arterials could be helpful for the future.
Oh, thank you. What about you, Norma?
I think for us, I would tell other cities, make sure you have a maintenance response ready to go once you put these stations out. You don't want stations broken for a long period of time. People don't like that. Also, the parking, be aware of your parking rules in the city. We had to put certain ordinances in place before the enforcement could ticket them. One thing I did want to mention was that we're going to be having a Smart City Streetlight virtual conference on September 10th, where we're going to have a session on talking about more details on how we've done EV. So, and also Yannick is part of that conference. So you want to come see him in his video. So if anybody wants to go to register, it's free. It's at smartcityla.com. And we'll have some more information how we hook up to the units and everything. So.
Great, thank you. So Susan, you have the last word and probably 30 seconds to go. So
well, I just want to say thank you to the panelists, because you've been there, and it's listening to you is a learning experience for me. We still have a way to go, and just to get a shovel in the ground. So I'm sure there'll be more surprises to come, and would probably reserve answering this question until after we actually get a station sited and installed. But we just want to learn from this pilot, again, to look at utilization and growth of the EV ecosystem, and we're just hoping that this takes us there.
Great. So I want to say a big thank you to all of you, and I feel so bad because there's so many questions that we didn't have time to answer, but I will take all these questions and making sure they get an answer. And I might probably poll you, each of you, like my favorite panelists. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch shortly, also giving you the recording of the session and answering your question. If you have any other question, please write them at marketing@flow.com, and we'll make our best to answer all your hot topics. Thank you so much.
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.